Hey friends, I'm Paul Bunda and I'm an elder here at Rain City Church. Thank you so much for watching our service today and being a part of our growing online community. Our goal is to help you experience God in the everyday, discovering what it means to be loved by Him, to belong to and to help build authentic community that then compels us to become a positive force as we lean into our God-given potential. Now, one way we experience God in the everyday is by joining one of our Rain City Zoom groups. These virtual groups are an incredible opportunity to meet others, to stay connected, and experience God through diving into His Word alongside others. Interested? Drop a comment below or download our free Rain City app and be sure to turn on your push notifications so we can stay connected. And speaking of staying connected, follow us on social media. Our accounts are updated daily and we provide up-to-date information, cool stories, and so much more. So on behalf of the rest of the Rain City team, the elders and leadership, thank you for being a part of this church. And by the way, if you're here for the first time, drop us a note in the comments and let us know where you're from. We hope you enjoy this week's service.
Hi everyone, I hope that you're having a great week. I want to welcome you to this quick segment that we are calling Kids Corner. Grown-ups, I would love if you would just take a moment and open up your Rain City app or go onto the Rain City website and look through our Kids Church online curriculum. There we have a kids service available for 18-month-olds all the way to your 5-year-olds, kindergartners through 3rd graders, as well as a preteen section for our 4th and 5th graders. We also have activities and devotions that they can be doing throughout the week. We would love if your children were engaging in those. So you can either pause this video now and send them to the other room to watch that while you watch the adult service. You guys can come back together after to discuss the curriculum, the questions, what they learned, all of that kind of stuff as a family, or you can do that later on together or throughout the week, whatever works best for you. We have had so many families doing those and we'd love to have even more people doing that all together as a family. We love you guys and we miss you so much. Please take a moment and listen from one of our friends. A lot of you are going to recognize this face, to hear what our preschool memory verse is for the week, and then stick around for another friend that I know a lot of you have been missing so much to hear what we're going to be learning about in Kids Church this week.
Hi, friend. Welcome to Kids Corner. God made us all perfect, and Romans 8:39 tells us nothing can separate us from God's love.
Hello, this is Teacher Jeremiah here from the 2 and 3-year-old class. Today I'm coming to you live from space. I miss seeing all of you in class, but I am so excited about what we are going to be learning this week. Preschool friends, we will be learning how God made each of us so special. And for our older kids, what we'll be learning about is how God makes what might seem impossible possible in our new kids series called Unstuck. I hope you all will check it out. Have a beautiful week, and remember, you are perfect and loved by God just the way you are.
Hey Rain City, what's up? Matt here. Wanted to take a quick second and share with you this incredible story of what your generosity is doing in our region. Take a listen to our friends Ian and Stacy.
Hey Rain City, what's up? My name's Ian.
I'm Stacy.
We live over here in Ellensburg, Washington, across the mountain.
And I work for Central Washington University within the international department. So the main focus is on all of our international students who come from about 66 different countries and come to Central for their degree or short-term study. A lot of them have been severely impacted during this time, during the pandemic, due to campus moving all online. Our students have lost their on-campus employment. Back home, banks have closed, parents have lost their jobs. And we have students struggling to pay rent, pay their tuition fees, cover their health insurance. And unfortunately, since they are international students, they're not eligible for the federal stimulus or any financial aid from the U.S. government. So I reached out to Rain City to help one of our needy students, Tomas from Argentina, and Rain City came through in a big way and helped out with his rent during this really difficult time. So we just wanted to say thank you and how appreciative we are of Rain City bringing in our international students into the larger community here. Thank you, Rain City.
Okay, so I'm making this video as a thank you for Rain City Church for the enormous support I've received. It's a little beam of light in this, sea of darkness that we're going through right now.
Thanks again for your generosity. And what you might not know is that Tomas was about to try to sell that cello to stay in his apartment. So thank you for allowing him to keep his instrument and to keep going in the music program there. Love you guys. See you soon.
Hi, everyone, and greetings to wherever you're at. This is kind of a representation of my life right now, which is a life coming out of boxes. I'm here in our new house, and in the back there's like this room for a studio, and so this is kind of the overflow of our stuff and my art stuff that's all still in boxes, and we'll one day find a home. Well, and that's another good representation of the reality I am, which is this camera is set up on a box and it fell over. So there you go. So we're gonna talk about spiritual practices, and I want to introduce a spiritual practice that maybe we don't often think of as a spiritual practice, because usually when we think about spiritual practices, we think about like prayer or solitude, silence, these very like religious things. But I want to talk to you about the spiritual practice of wonder. Instead of doing something in this room that's all filled with boxes, I want to show a clip from my show called Say Yes, a Liturgy of Not Giving Up on Yourself. And I have a specific section where I talk about wonder, and I do it really well, and so I want to show this to you and then come back afterwards and kind of talk about it for a second. So enjoy this.
The famous psychotherapist Carl Jung said this: until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. We are narrative-making machines. Right now, our five senses are taking in way more information than we could ever possibly translate or understand. And so what our brains are doing is they're synthesizing all of that information into a narrative. Mostly, am I safe or not, right? Like, say you've never been here before and you walked down the stairs and you came into this theater. You heard some music, these people seemed delightful, you decided to stay. You didn't even probably have to examine your narrative, right? You just knew it, you're like, okay. But if you would have walked in and there was like a pack of wild wolves eating a caribou carcass, like you wouldn't have to think about that either. You'd be like, not getting eaten alive tonight. Nope, and just, that's it. And those stories and those narratives are happening all the time about am I safe or not. We also have narratives that are happening that are, who am I? Where am I going? And what am I capable of doing? And those are more insidious because those narratives came to us by how adults talked to us when we were kids and how we learned to survive in the world. And they're also working all the time. I got to a spot in my life where I had some really bad narratives. And I was working with a therapist, and she was like, pay attention to what you're saying to yourself. And so I was. But I wondered, as I was writing these things down, I was like, are there ever a time when I'm not like having a narrative? Is there ever a time when the narrative stops? And there are. And we call those moments wonder. Wonder. Have you ever been to a concert? What's a concert? It's just some human beings, instruments, electricity, speakers, sound system, an audience, a venue, right? And all of that's working together. But there's always a moment where all of those elements are working together and they begin to transcend. And you're there and you're like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm glad I'm here, right? And you don't want to be anywhere else. You're just there and it's wondrous. Or I surf. Sometimes, right? Like I have kids, I don't get out very much. But like in nature, you got the mountains here, all that stuff. Surfing's amazing because the surface is literally moving. There's animals below and above. There's weather patterns. There's tides that are affected by the moon. All of that stuff. And most of the time in surfing, you're trying not to drown. But it's usually when you get past the breakers and you can sit on your board for a second and rest that you see all of this happening and you go, oh my gosh. This is so huge, everything that's happening, and I'm just such a small part of it all, and you're filled with wonder. My wife and I were married in Seattle, and I got a job a few years later in Houston, Texas. And so we decided to take our moving truck on a road trip down to Texas. And one of the first places we stopped at was called Craters of the Moon National Park. It's in Idaho. I'd never heard of it, but thousands of years ago, this volcano exploded, lava rocks everywhere. There's not a lot of vegetation, so it looks like the surface of the moon. It's very barren. It's also one of the least light polluted places in North America. And so when people were like, we were gonna camp, and people were like, oh, you're camping? Cool. Hey, you gotta stay up and look at the stars. The stars are amazing. And we're like, okay, we will. And then we shared a bottle of wine and we're like, we're tired. And so we went to, it's like midnight and we're like, yeah, cool, stars, great, I've seen them, right? And then we went to bed. 4 a.m., my wife's like, hey, I gotta pee. And I was like, I do too. You're right, let's walk down to the bathrooms together. And so we unzipped the tent and it was this! It was this! I've grown up in cities my whole life where there's a standard 16 stars out every night. This is what the night sky looks like when you live where there's no lights. And I did go pee, and then I stood there in wonder, taking in the beauty of it all. Like, what is the common denominator between the stars and nature, the concert? The common denominator is you. The common denominator is you. Because wonder is not an exterior destination that you need to get to. Wonder is an interior filter that you learn to see life through. It usually happens in new situations, right? Because we don't have a narrative about it. Say you go to Europe and you travel and you're like, this city is magical. But day 3, you're like, where can we go drinking, right? Because you've already developed a narrative about it. And it's that familiarity that kills the wonder. And I was like, is there a simple practice I can do every day that I can touch this wonder, this wonder? That's what I want to get to. And there is. And I started doing it, and I'm going to share it with you. But before we do, let's look at some art for a second, because it'll help us understand what's going on. So there's this great painter named Scott Lisfield, and he makes these really delightful paintings of this astronaut walking around our planet. Now, there's no other people in the paintings, just this one astronaut. So because there's no other people in the paintings, we begin to look at the viewpoint that the astronaut is seeing. We begin looking at all these things that maybe we think are normal, but we're like, yeah, what are these things? Where did these things come from? What is this place in Southern California that puts joy inside of you? Do you know about this place? Yeah, right? And so we begin to become visitors to our own world. And when we become visitors to our own space, we don't know the narratives, and it's in the unknowing that the doorway of wonder opens up. The doorway of wonder opens up in the unknowing. So I propose to us, our daily practice is that we need to become astronauts of wonder in our own lives. We have a tool every day, and that tool is a question. And as our tool, the tool of the astronauts of wonder is this question every day: what don't I know? Whenever you find yourself just like bored, nothing's going to change, just go, well, what don't I know about right now? What don't I know?
So we've all been quarantined in different ways. Some of us have been isolated in our apartment by ourselves. Some of us have been stuck with our families. Not stuck, but we get to be with our families. Some of us have really enjoyed being isolated or slowed down. But maybe what's consistent for all of us is that we've become very familiar with our surroundings, of what's going on, and maybe we've lost kind of the magic or wonder of what's happening. And I think wonder is a really important spiritual practice, because wonder is the experience, the rapturous experience of being alive. And wonder is about being here and experiencing the divine that's woven into all things. And so why don't you take that simple question? Your spiritual practice is to just go, what don't I know about what's happening right now? And by doing that, that can open up your eyes and the doorway of wonder to what's going around. Grace and peace to you, and keep up the awesomeness.
God of Abraham, you're the God of covenant and faithful promises. And time again, you have proven you'll do just what you say. The storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast. And I'll let heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. And God, from age to age, the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. No history can prove, there's nothing you can do. You're faithful and true. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast. And let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. You'll never let me down. Oh, I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. You'll never let me down. You'll never let me down. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me.
Man, people are going through some crazy stuff right now. I mean, I know that there's a lot of people who have had to completely change their commutes during this time. Most parents are completely faking their way through homeschool right now. Some people are starting to cut their own hair. And I know that there are many people that are beginning to really get tired of these quarantine memes. A lot of people are going through a lot of crazy things right now. And whether your life has been accelerated through this time, or maybe it's completely gone to a full stop, or you're somewhere in between, everybody's going through something right now. So we decided to, in addition to offering the Enneagram resources that we have been, we're going to move those over to our Enneagram website, which you can find here. We'll continue to provide more resources in the weeks coming through that site. But on Sundays, we wanted to pivot to a series that might be a little more applicable to where most people are right now, and that is going through something tough. So we're going to pivot to a new series called How to Get Through What You Are Going Through. We're looking at 6 lessons from the life of Moses. So why are we looking at the life of Moses? Well, first of all, it's because Moses is a very significant figure in the Bible, and especially in the Old Testament. He was not only significant in leading God's people, becoming one of the first main leaders for the Hebrews, but he also was the first prophet. In Deuteronomy, he prophesied that God, will raise up from among your own people a prophet who will be like me. Listen to him. He's talking about Jesus here. A few verses later, he's quoting God when he says, I'll send them another prophet like you from among their own people. I'll put my words in the mouth of this prophet who will tell them everything I command them to say. Even in the New Testament, the writer of Hebrews notes that Moses plays a very important role. And he says, Moses was certainly faithful in God's house as a servant. His work was an illustration of the truths God would reveal later. But Christ, as the Son, is in charge of God's entire house, and we are God's house, if we keep our courage and remain confident in our hope in Christ. We're looking at the life of Moses, learning from lessons from the life of Moses, because it helps us point to Jesus. It helps us become more like Jesus in our lives. Now, let me give you a little bit of context around the book of Exodus that we'll be in. Exodus is the second book of the Bible. The first book is Genesis. Genesis is the book of beginnings, but Exodus is really the book of redemption. The story of the book of Exodus begins about 3,400 years ago from today. But it starts about 350 years after the end of Genesis, the book of Genesis. And at the very end of the book of Genesis, we see the story of this guy named Joseph. And Joseph was a Hebrew who God raised all the way to be the second in command in Egypt. And he was, if you don't know the story, he was a good, God-fearing man, and many bad things happened to him, and yet he was still able to remain faithful, and God continued to use him. And he saved Egypt from famine. He saved the kingdom. Now, though, we're 350 years after that, and really Joseph has kind of become a forgotten figure of the past. And Moses is born into this Egypt, and he is off to a very rough start. See, 350 years before Moses was born, when Joseph entered into Egypt, the Hyksos dynasty were the ones who ruled in Egypt. And they were not indigenous Egyptian people. They were people who were mostly outsiders and shepherds, and they came in and conquered Egypt and then were ruling. And they were much more kind and open-hearted and generous towards outsiders. But now the indigenous Egyptians have taken over Egypt. They've taken back rulership, and they are not favorable at all to the outsiders. And this is the Egypt that Moses is born into. So let's dive in. Look at Exodus chapter 1, verse 8. It says, "Eventually a new king came to power in Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done. He said to his people, 'Look, the people of Israel now outnumber us and are stronger than we are. We must make a plan to keep them from growing even more. If we don't, and if war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country.'" Now, what do we know about this king? We know, number one, that he is prideful. He's arrogant. How do we know that? Because he shows no interest in learning the history of the kingdom that he is ruling. He doesn't know who Joseph is. He doesn't care to know who Joseph is. He feels like he has bigger problems on his hands right now. And I think that is a huge show of what arrogance and pride is in the life of all people, is that when we feel like we're the ones we're the ones that get it. We're the generation that finally has everything that we need, and we're the smartest ones. Anyone that came before us, clearly they didn't have all the information. They were dumb. They lacked, they weren't a smart people. They lacked whatever. We're the ones who finally have everything we need, and now we can figure this out on our own. That's just simple pride and arrogance, and all of us do it all the time. And so I just encourage you, where are you doing that in your life? Where do you need to take a pause and continue to learn about where we come from our ancestors? Who's someone older than you that you are learning from, that you can ask questions from? Are you continuing to go back to the Word of God? Do you go to the Bible? Do you learn about our ancestors and where we come from, and how we just continue to learn more and more about God as we journey together? But this is where this king is. He's not worried about learning about history. Why? Because he feels like he has a big problem on his hands. And the problem is the Hebrews are just making babies, right? They are going to be so many that they're going to be able to rise up against us, and they could overthrow us, or they could just say, we're done, we're leaving, and you can't do anything about it. And this is their workforce. They have a free workforce there, and they want to keep it in place. And so this Pharaoh says, we've got to do something about it. So he comes up with a pretty simple two-pronged approach to figure this out, to keep them in their place, to keep them in slavery. The first is that he wants to wear them out. He wants to wear out the adults. So you can see in verse 11, it says, so the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. They are going to work them so hard now that they won't have the energy, the power, or the will to be able to even revolt if they wanted to. They're just going to work them so hard. The second thing, the second prong of his strategy is that they are going to kill the newborns. So you can see in verse 15, it says, then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave this order to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. When you help the Hebrew women as they give birth, watch as they deliver. If the baby is a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. This is the brutal world in which Moses was born into. I mean, if you had to choose where to begin your story, this wouldn't make even the top 10. You don't want to start as a Hebrew in Egypt at this time. It is a rough start. But if you know the story of Moses, you know that his start is not the thing that defined him, right? I mean, this is a great reminder that God can take a rough start and redeem it. I know that all of us have gone through times where we felt like we had a terrible start, a rough start, that we wish we could have a do-over. And there are no do-overs, but there is redemption, and God is offering that to every single one of us. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. And if you finish by being faithful and by trusting God and continue to trust Him and His plan and walk in the right way, then you will see that redemption unfold before you. You may not see the whole story, but you will see part of it, and you can continue to know that God is in control of this. Where have you believed the lie that just because you had a rough start, it means that you're done, that you're down for the count, that you're discounted? Where did you give up way too soon and you need God's strength to continue on? How can we be praying with you as you are fighting through that rough start? You can go on our app, or you can DM us, or if you want to, you can comment and let us know how we can be praying with you and for you. We count it an honor to pray for each of those every single week. In the middle of a rough start, everyone has to make a tough decision. And Moses' parents were faced with an impossibly tough decision. Look at the beginning of Exodus chapter 2. It says, about this time, a man and a woman from the tribe of Levi got married. Now, we don't find out their names until later, but Moses' parents' names are Amram, was his dad, and Jochebed, that is his mother's name. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She saw that he was a special baby and kept him hidden for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she got a basket made of papyrus reeds and waterproofed it with tar and pitch. She put the baby in the basket and laid it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile River. This would be an impossible task, that you know that if a boy is born, he is immediately supposed to be killed by the Egyptians. And so as a parent, you want to protect your baby. But how do you keep a baby hidden? What do babies do? Babies cry. That's really their only way of communicating when we're born. That's our kind of main way of letting you know, I need something, right? So babies cry. My wife and I just this week, we watched a movie called A Quiet Place. And that was part of the premise of the movie, is they have to keep this baby quiet in order for this baby and for them to survive. And so they're trying to figure out all of these ways to kind of try to keep this baby quiet and from it being able to make a sound while it's crying, all these kind of things. And the whole time you just feel like this while you're watching the movie, because it just feels so stressful. Imagine that as parents, if that's your baby, you have to keep this baby quiet or else it will be discovered and killed. That is what Moses' parents are going through in this situation. But it comes to a point where they can't keep him hidden. They can't keep him quiet anymore. And so they have to make a really difficult choice. They have to choose, do we just allow him to be discovered and taken and killed? Or do we take a bold step of faith and try to give him a chance at life, a chance at something else, a chance at a new beginning, a chance at redemption during these really rough times? You see, Moses' parents, they're God-fearing people. They were people that believed that every life is made in the image of God, and that it is not our decision of whether we should allow that life to live or die. That's God's decision. And so they say, you know what, we are going to make a very difficult decision here to keep this life alive, because we believe that this is an image bearer of God, that life is sacred. And so they take a really bold step of faith here and make a really tough decision. But it's a great reminder that the toughest decisions are when the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. There are so many people, both right here locally and in this country and around the world, who are faced with a difficult decision like this every day. And that's one of the reasons why we are so pro-adoption at this church and in God's kingdom, because we know that so many people are faced with these impossible decisions and what led them to that decision as well. We want to be part of the solution in all of those things. And we want to help people know that the church is here. The church is helping bring new beginnings and new hope to these precious children, because they were all made in the image of God, every single one of us. And so we invite them into a new hope, a new beginning, and a new future. And so whether that's through adoption or through orphan care, we want to make sure that these who are some of the most vulnerable lives, these image bearers of God in our world, that we want them to know that they are loved, that they are known, they are cared for. Someone cares for them. So thank you for your continued support of adoption and orphan care. You are making a huge difference all around the world. You are giving so many children a new beginning, even though they were born into a rough start. And that's what God can bring us. He brings all of us a new beginning. Look at what happens after Moses' parents take a huge leap of faith and try to give him a chance at life. They've put him in a basket. They've sent him down the river. And now look at what happens. The baby's sister then stood at a distance, watching to see what would happen to him. Soon Pharaoh's daughters came down to bathe in the river, and her attendants walked along the riverbank. When the princess saw the basket among the reeds, she sent her maid to go get it for her. When the princess opened it, she saw the baby. The little boy was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This must be one of the Hebrew children," she said. Then the baby's sister approached the princess. "Should I go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" she asked. "Yes, do," the princess replied. So the girl went and called the baby's mother. "Take this baby and nurse him for me," the princess told the baby's mother. "I will pay you for your help." So the woman took her baby home and nursed him. Later, when the boy was older, his mother brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own. The princess named him Moses, for she explained, "I lifted him out of the water." Now, some pretty incredible things have happened here. Imagine the joy of Jochebed, Moses' mother, when Miriam, his sister, Moses' sister, his older sister, who had watched this and saw the princess find him in the river, pick him up. And then Miriam says, "Wait, I have an idea. Do you want me to go get one of the nurses to nurse him?" And so that's what she does. And who does she get? She gets Moses' actual mother. And then we find out that not only does Jochebed get to take the baby and continue to raise the baby and nurse the baby, and see the baby all the time. But the princess says, I'll pay you for it. This is incredible, right? This is the way that I think we miss so many times how God works. That God, when you are faithful to him, that he can return blessings to you like that in ways that I think we may miss. But Jochebed is now being paid to raise her own baby. How incredible is that? It's like when Paul was trying to make it to Rome in the New Testament in the book of Acts. And he's trying to raise money to get there. And then he ends up getting arrested. And then who ends up taking him to Rome? The government does. They paid for him to go to Rome. He gets a paid trip by the government to go to Rome. Just because it wasn't the way you thought it would go doesn't mean God isn't going to let it happen. So now Jochebed is getting paid to raise her own baby. There was a study released a while back that showed that if a stay-at-home parent were paid for all of the duties that they actually did between cooking and teaching and chauffeuring and cleaning and all of the things that you know happen as a stay-at-home parent, that parent should be paid upwards of $150,000 a year. If only the world actually rewarded fairly the people who are making the biggest impact in the lives of those here on earth. But the good thing is that even though the world may miss it, God never misses that. God is watching all the time, and he is and will reward those who continue to make the right choices, to obey him, to follow him, to do the right thing, to bless others, and to bless his kingdom. But we know that this is not an easy process. This is a hard process. Many of you maybe feel like you're in a similar spot to Moses, where you were started in a rough spot. Maybe you feel right now that this right now is a rough start to the year, to whatever this next chapter was that you thought it was going to be, and now things are so wildly different. Now we are in a totally new space, and we're off to a rough start. What do? Well, continue to make tough decisions. What are tough decisions? Tough decisions are continuing to follow God, even when it's not the easy thing to do. Now is the time to continue to make the hard choices, to continue to look more like love, to follow Jesus, to trust God in these times. And why do we trust God? Because of this. Just because we don't see God's plan, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have one. Just because Moses was born into a very volatile place, it doesn't mean that God didn't have a plan for him. Even though he was off to a rough start and his parents had to make a very tough decision, God gave him a new beginning. And I want to encourage you to continue to trust God, that he has a new beginning for all of us. So whether you find yourself in a tough start right now where you are saying, this wasn't how this was supposed to be. This was supposed to be a season of prosperity, not panic. I mean, we had a really great plan going. We had things that were moving forward, and now they've been completely stopped, and we don't even know what the other side of this is going to be. We don't know if there is going to be another side of this for what I was doing professionally, or if we're going to be able to live here, or whatever those things are. That this is a rough start right now. I would say just keep trusting God. How? Through tough decisions. Some of you are making impossible decisions right now. That you are wondering, I don't know if I have a job. I don't know financially what the other side of this thing looks like. Even worse, I know that many of you are really struggling in a place where you're saying, I'm not even sure how I'm going to pay for food or how I'm going to stay in my home past this. And first of all, let us see if we can help you. You can go to this link right here and you can fill out an application, and we want to be able to try to help you make it through this very difficult season. But also keep trusting God. Keep making those tough decisions that are the right decisions, because God honors those decisions. Be faithful, especially in the tough times, because God will bring all of us a new beginning. Because listen, our greatest hope is not in the CARE Act. It's not in the Paycheck Protection Plan. Our greatest hope is not in a government rollout to what this is going to be like moving forward. Our greatest hope is not in finding a cure to the coronavirus. Our greatest hope is God. And God is still sovereign, and God is still good, and God is still a wonderful, loving Father who still has a plan. This is the time to not give up. Don't give in. Keep praying for and encouraging one another. Keep serving one another. Keep being generous towards God's kingdom, towards one another. Keep knowing that we are in this thing together. Don't give in.
I lost myself somewhere, a place I can't recall. In some uncharted space, my soul just went AWOL. I'm like the walking dead. Well, truthfully, I crawl. And though my knees may bleed, I don't feel much at all. Like a numb that stings, a phantom limb that burns. But I got fight left yet before I catch the hearse. 'Cause I'm not giving in. No, I'm not giving in. Between me and the light, I know a dragon sits, his shadow looming large, his darkness has a grip. And as I soldier on, this giant thing I feel gets smaller every step that I keep drawing near. Because some fight left still, I've got some fight left yet. You best not count me out, you best not pound the man out yet. I've got some fight left still, I've got some fight left yet. I know I may be down, but I'm not finished yet. 'Cause
Thank you to our first responders and medical workers. You are our superheroes. I want to invite you all to share this video if you found it inspiring. And as the West Coast feed is a Rain City Church outreach band, Our primary goal is to encourage, inspire, and make a real difference in the world. And even though our live shows are canceled for now, there's still a lot we can do. Would you join us in supporting our church and the COVID-19 Relief Fund financially? You can do that online through our app or website with the links in the video description. Let's close our time together today in prayer. God, guide us through this challenging season. Thank you for being present in our need. Give us patience and wisdom and increase our capacity to love each other and you more this week. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for spending time with us this week, y'all, and we'll see you soon.